Well, tonight I'm at the Big Bear City Council meeting. It's about to start in a few minutes, and I'm here because I'm interested in taping a couple of items that are on our agenda that I think would be of interest to you. So let's wait for it to begin.
I'd like to bring forward Andy Coots, who is the program leader of the Southern California Forest Health Protection. She works for U.S. Forest Service, and her team leads the study of the forest pathology, where she has a doctorate degree. And her program tonight will explain to us why we want to continue the local state of emergency dealing with our forest. And I think she'll further explain that it's not just a bark beetle infestation as well, it is a systemic problem that we need to look at the entire forest. So,
can everyone hear me all right? Well, I thank you for inviting me, especially on such a prestigious evening. Don't these young men look handsome in their uniforms? So, I have a background in fire and forest health. I worked principally in fire for the last 20 years, but I have a degree in forest pathology and forest management and fire science. And I've spent my career dedicated to the process of revitalizing our forests. And this is what I do, and so I'm very anxious to share my passion with you and also to partner with you in this important work that we are taking on here. So my project is a fairly new one. I'm working in the Forest Health Protection Program. I have two employees, a forest pathologist, Paul Sambino, and a forest entomologist, Tom Coleman. And I would encourage you to call any of the three of us anytime you'd like to talk about the health of forests up on the mountain or in Southern California. We feel very committed that we are in partnership. You know, you people whose community literally has the fire and forest health issues in your lap or in your backyards, if you will. You are the people who are really on the front line. We are subject matter experts, and we are genuinely here to help. And I would like to become more engaged with you. I have plenty of ideas about how we can do that, and I'm very appreciative of what you already have in place in terms of your contribution to the MAST organization. A bit about forest health. I want to talk about the interactions of forest health as well as fuels, fire risk, fire behavior, and fire effects. We know that there is an interplay, and I'd like to detail this for you a little bit this evening. So how about the road to forest health? We are obviously on it. The question is, are we there yet? And if not, how and when are we going to get there? So let's talk about bark beetles. We started thinking in Southern California that we were managing our forests for recreation. This is true, no? We didn't have a tremendous timber program in Southern California because of our weather effects. And consequently, the Forest Service started managing strictly for recreation. And we didn't pay very much attention to what was happening in terms of forest thinning and the dynamics of forest function as it related to forest structure. Now, I've spent a great deal of time in the tropics, and so there's some concepts about forest revitalization that have to do with mimicking the original species that may have been on the site, the original structure which may have been on the site, which is important in Southern California, and the original function of these forests. And until we literally had miles of bark beetles fighting in our forests, we felt pretty comfortable with what we were seeing out in the woods. And certainly, I believe that we all felt like trees are good. You know, we want to see trees in our forests, and we want to see them around our homes. But of course, they have to be in balance. So what about the bark beetle? Is it still a risk? Certainly, we have done an excellent job on doing the initial thinning. As I drove up through the rim of the world. In fact, it's kind of amazing to think of Big Bear Lake as being a valley after coming up white-knuckled along the rim of the world highway, kind of looking down there. But we have done an excellent job of starting to clean out the corridors. But is our job done? Well, in fact, there's a bark beetle outbreak above fawn skin now. And as I page through the next few slides, just pay attention. You know, these are the things that we were seeing this summer. So this is not a very good slide. You can see here, I've got a pointer right here. Well, let me just move on. There are a few little red circles if your eyes are strong enough to see them. And here's another image of areas of bark beetle outbreak right around Big Bear Lake right now. So we know that it is still going on. There's Jeffrey pine beetle, just above fawn skin. Again, dying trees. Here you have western pine beetle over in the San Jacinto area along Highway 243. And although we've done extensive thinning along Highway 243, we're still seeing predominant outbreaks. We have the western pine beetle from Thomas Mountain. And we have ifs infecting the Thomas Mountain area. And again, you can see Jeffrey pine beetle and flathead borers moving into Holcomb Valley northeast of Big Bear. And then also wood borers. You know, bark beetles are something that we kind of classify because we've seen so much of them and they're very apparent. But one of the interesting things that Tom Coleman has found this year, our entomologist, is that after doing our aerial surveys, which we do every year over the San Bernardino forest and other southern forests, we're seeing frequent pockets of mortality, but many of these are oak or rather wood borers. And so we're also seeing, so how about thinning? Is our job done? If I query the National Forest, what the response that I get is that maybe we've hit about 25% of the land that needs to be thinned, and really that's 25% of the land that's accessible by machinery. The opportunity to get out into the wildlands that are not easily accessible just probably won't be touched given the situation that we have with budgets and simply the priorities and the weight of the tasks that we have before us. How about the mass data? Unfortunately, the last time I talked to the person collecting the mass data, they told me that the San Bernardino National Forest was the last to get their data in, and so we were actually holding up the process there. But the mass data itself is not sufficient to really reflect the enormity of the task before us. How about other agencies? Do we have access to that type of data, and how accurate is it? How about the commercial lands? Are we collecting the type of information that we can pool together through our master organizations and through other data collection agencies to truly get a picture of, for instance, the commercial, the private, and the conservation areas that are also being thinned? We probably have an idea, but not a very accurate one. And now what about the environment? Unfortunately, things are getting hotter and drier. Whether you believe in global warming or not, we can attest to the fact that we have been in a drought. And in fact, even 10 years ago when I left California for a while to go to Washington, D.C. and Wisconsin to work in the East for a while, all of the predictors were saying that we were actually coming out of a very green period, and now we're going back to our typical environment, which was actually typified by what we would now consider as being a drought. And then how about ozone? How about atmospheric deposition? Anyone that lives in Southern California, of course, is acutely aware of the air that we breathe. One of the interesting scientific facts that I've found out since I've been back in Southern California for about 3 years now is that the tremendous ozone loads that we have in the air up here are keeping the stomates of the trees open at night. What does this mean? Typically at night, the trees close their little openings in the needles and underneath the leaves that allow them to respire, that allow air to go back and forth. And so they close at night so that the tree can recapture its moisture potential during the night. Now, if those stomates stay open all night long, they're going to continue to respire all night long and dry out all night long, therefore not recapturing the original turgidity that they would have under more favorable conditions. In addition to this, we have tremendous nitrogen deposition. When I came up in forestry, we were always taught that nitrogen is the most limiting element in a forest. But now, in the forests in Southern California, we're putting so much nitrogen compounds in there just from atmospheric deposition from the air that it's almost like growing spinach. What's the effect on our trees? Well, unfortunately, too much nitrogen makes the trees even that much more susceptible. There's a tendency for them to overgrow, but in reality, they actually become weakened. And they become more susceptible, more succulent, as it were, to the things that like to chew on them, be they pathogens or different types of beetles. And then the thing that concerns me most, as I came up the hill today, I just drove back by so many dead trees, so many dead and dying trees. Now, as a fire person, come summer, I used to be very excited about getting out on fires, and the more fires, the better. But in the old days, we used to read about legacy fires, the Man Gulch fire, where there were firefighter mortalities. And we studied these legacy fires as examples, as bad examples of what can happen when fire really is out of control, or when fire management is really out of control. I used to say when I first got into forestry, longer ago than I am young, that we could fireproof the western forest, being a prescribed burner, if we had gotten out there and really worked on consuming those fuels, had really worked on thinning the forest. An interesting thing about fire is that it preferentially thins diseased trees, beetle-attract trees, and weakened trees. But now, think about the summer that we had. Think about last year. Those legacy fires are no longer a legacy, but rather commonplace, where we are frequently having, 5,000 acre trees that burned from Monterey all the way down to almost Tijuana this summer. I'm not sure that the Los Padres forest has trees left. So we are no longer in a situation where fire is in balance with the forest. We have so many trees and so many fuels and such a bad situation that now we can't fight fire and we can't light fire. We can't conduct prescribed burns as we did in the old days. And I'm not even going to go into air pollution regulations or atmospheric regulations that we have to put up with through the municipalities. I don't mean to say put up with in a bad way, but we've moved into an era where we can no longer allow natural smoke from huge wildfires to be a balance. Okay, so what about other forest health issues? Being a forest pathologist, my early training indicated that usually trees don't succumb to bark beetles unless one of two things happens. One is that they have severe root rot or root disease infection, and the second of all is that they are under a considerable amount of stress. So what about these root disease pockets? In addition to what we can see very visibly with bark beetles, root disease pockets, as you can see here, contain a great deal of standing dead and ladder fuels. Often when you walk through the woods and you come into a root disease infection center, typically what your first impression is that you come into a nice little meadow. But they tend to expand year after year, and eventually you have the site that is completely out of production of trees. In addition, there is catastrophic failure of what we would call hazard trees falling on people's heads, particularly in these high visitor use areas, these recreational areas that typify our forests. And then we have issues about stump treatment. Most of you are, especially homeowners who have a little bit of woodland around your property, are aware of the fact that once we thin trees, which we have done a tremendous amount because we need to treat stumps with sporax or borate compound to prevent the spores landing on the stumps and increasing the anosis hazard in Southern California. As you can see here, black stain root disease is also an issue. As we think about, we need to really prepare for what's coming up. And it's hard to prepare for something that we don't know about. But one thing that we do know is that, we're not going to have like Mexico come up into Southern California. But what we probably will have is a favoring of species such as pinyon pine that are a little bit more drought tolerant and will occupy a little bit harsher sites. And we also know that we have tremendous black stain root disease that is coming into pinyon pine. There's a big pocket of it right above where they're going to put the new zoo in the Discovery Center. So we have these other root disease issues. Then a favorite of mine, dwarf mistletoes are rampant in Southern California. And these, of course, are huge fire species as well. You can see from the form of the tree here that the branches do not tend to self-prune when they have mistletoe infection. And in conifers, these brooms tend to be very pitchy, very heavy. They are loaded with resin. They fall and break from the trees, and you get a lot of fuel forming around the base of these trees. And these form what we call jackpot fuels, or pockets of highly intensely burning fuels. And then I already talked about the problems of ozone, but these things all work together. We really are not so much concerned anymore in Southern California about individual diseases, but the fact that our forests are in decline due to the interactions of all of these different diseases and pests. Diseases, pests, and environmental stressors. So, what is the plan? The continuing resolution solution, I know, is being discussed, whether we are continuing on a statewide level or on a local level with these disaster initiatives. We really need to think about, what are the next steps? I hope that I can impress you that, in fact, we are not there yet. We've gotten a good start. We probably are a good quarter of the way down the road. assuming that we can keep this up and maintain the sustainability of our forests. So how can we help? How can I help you? I am truly interested in partnerships with you, and I believe that there are a number of areas in which our role is very clearly defined. One is in doing investigation of the situation out in the forest. You know, we do these aerial surveys, and we also want to partner with CAL FIRE, with the local fire departments, with the MAST organization, and with the community members who are active in investigating areas where we're seeing especially new pockets of mortality and expanding pockets of mortality, irrespective of the cause. We would like to work with you in developing a strategy. I think that we have an excellent strategy that has been formed in dealing with fire issues, in evacuating people from the hill when we have a fire breakout. But we really also need to take the next steps and form a strategy for maintaining, sustaining, improving, and revitalizing our forests and forest health. And we need to collaborate in management, especially on the community level. You know, irrespective of how you feel about the war or the economy or the president, and I know we're all thinking about this because November 4th is coming up in a couple of weeks is election day. But I tell you that the agencies can't do it by themselves anymore. And in reality, we shouldn't be doing it by ourselves anymore. I would suggest that the communities are where it starts. And the communities are the people that really have a stake in having healthy forests and having wildlands around them that we can enjoy for recreational and other purposes. So I have a few recommendations of ways that we have started and can continue. One is that in the past we had a Southern California Forest Pest Council Committee. We would like to revitalize this. Right now, Glenn Barley of CAL FIRE is the head of that organization, and we hope to kick off a new revitalization of this organization with a meeting that we hope to have in November in the Quimata area around Descanso and Alpine to look at what we fondly call oak crow, or a disease of oaks, of coast live oak and black oak in Southern California being taken out in a decline situation, but with a insect called the golden spotted oak borer. In addition to this, we have an oak decline task force. This is membership among ourselves and the Forest Service, the Riverside Fire Lab, CAL FIRE, the counties, and others. And we would very much appreciate any of you people that would like to join these task forces. In addition to looking at oak decline, we're also interested in issues such as species change. You know, when we have bark beetles that wipe out the conifer and fires that wipe out the conifer, we're seeing species change up on the mountain. I'm sure you can see this already, where the more fire-resistant oak are starting to take over some of these sites. In addition, a lot of ideas about ways that we can reach out to communities, and you have the ability to do things that I don't. I have a certain number of grants that I fund to forests for doing forest thinning, but the communities and the local fire departments have the ability to apply for state and private funds that I don't. But we do have the ability to work in partnership for doing news articles, for doing outreach, for doing posters, for posting forest health messages. And in fact, if you are interested in signing with displays of forest health messages, I would particularly like to talk to you about that, because where we don't have timber values in the trees that we're harvesting, sometimes it can be quite costly. Now, around a community center or in a high visibility area,